Hey, Mike Raine back here with Canadian Musician right now on a patio. Not even sure what the restaurant's called, but somewhere in downtown Toronto here.
Somewhere in Toronto.
And with me, one of the, I guess, most buzzed about rising stars in, singer-songwriters in Americana, roots, country, whatever you want to call it, but Colter Wall, who has, I'm a new album coming out, self-titled, this Friday, and I love everything I've heard off of it so far. You are one of the, if I may say so, one of the top emerging songwriters out of Canada and that I've heard in a long while. So it's a real pleasure to do this, man. But how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. It's good to talk to you. I appreciate the kind words.
Absolutely. And so, like I said, there has been a lot of buzz around you. Your 7-song EP from, I believe it's 2015, called Imaginary Appalachia, really put you on the map in not just in country circles, but kind of Americana roots, singer-songwriter, folk, that whole interrelated genres there. You turned a lot of heads with that album. Before we get into the new album, I just want to look back into that. Did any of that kind of take you by surprise? The shout-outs from, Rolling Stone magazine, Steve Earl giving you a standing ovation, opening for Lucinda Williams, all this stuff happening so early in your career. Did any of it take you off guard?
Absolutely, man. A lot of it was pretty shocking and a little jarring at first. But you I think you have to take that sort of stuff in stride. And as far as stuff with like Rolling Stone magazine and press stuff, that's all well and good. But getting recognition from other artists, like you mentioned, Steve and Lucinda Williams and people like that, that's what really hits hard and hits home, because those are heroes of mine and pretty big. It's a lot of inspiration that I've taken from the records that they put out and the music they make and the stories they tell. So to hear that, it certainly was shocking at first and a little bit surreal, but I'm grateful, man. I think I'm one of the luckiest dudes in the world, just in the sense that I got to meet those people and be mentioned in the same sentence as them, and the fact that they are appreciative of what I'm trying to do and the stories that I'm trying to tell is just unreal, man. So yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
Your sound, your lyrics, your voice even, it draws a lot of comparisons to the height of the outlaw country movement of the 70s, guys like Townes Van Zandt. Essentially, are they, while those comparisons are made, are they a direct inspiration for you? Like, when you were writing the songs, did you have those comparisons in mind, or it was essentially just something that happened?
Well, comparisons are an interesting thing, because I think everybody, when they hear something, when they hear a new artist or they hear a new singer-songwriter or the like, I think everyone's going to drop a different comparison. Some people will have the same one, but people hear things differently and kind of decide for themselves, I think, what it sounds like or what they want to associate it with. But as far as writing those songs, people like Townes, like you mentioned, huge influence on me and the way that I try to write songs and put a tale together, I guess, and it's not just within the world of country music and folk music. It's it goes beyond that too. But those are certainly some of the big hitters that those guys from that era and from all throughout history, they wrote songs that just they kind of stop you dead in your tracks and take your breath away, and I think that's the mark that me and anyone else as a songwriter should be trying to hit. So it certainly is flattering hearing people making those comparisons, and I don't think I'm anywhere even in the same league as those guys, but I'm certainly happy to be, like I said, happy to be mentioned alongside them, and just to have that association is a pretty great thing in this day and age for a guy like me.
Just because of the weight it would carry, everyone, it's no surprise you would want to not compare yourself directly to those guys. Just like it would be, no one wants to be called the voice of the generation or have the Dylan badge. It always seems to kind of be a death nail almost when people start making those, or at least inviting those comparisons.
Yeah, it sometimes feels that way. And it's also difficult when people like to make comparisons about the way you write or the way you sing or whatever it is, and and it can be hard sometimes to try to just feel like you have your own sound, and when people are constantly saying, you sound like so-and-so, or you remind me of so-and-so. But past that, at the same time, I think you have to take it as a compliment, and I always do, because those are the greats. And as strange as labels are, and certain comparisons people make sometimes can really be strange, but at the end of the day, it's meant to be a compliment, and I appreciate it whenever people are, feel the need to say something like that. It's it always comes from a good place, I think.
Yeah. Absolutely. And even the greats, people compared them to whoever came prior. Early in Bob Dylan's career, everyone is saying he's the new Woody Guthrie. It's kind of the cycle, and then at some point it flips over, and then the new people are sounding like they're the new Colter Wall or whatever. You know what I mean? But even I was just going to go with that. Right? The fact that those comparisons are even being made just is a signifier of your songwriting chops at a relatively early age. How did you develop as a songwriter? When did you start writing your own songs, and did you study the craft of making music? Like, did you dissect those greats and how they did it? Like, how did you get to the point you're at as a songwriter?
Well, I guess firstly, I just tried to just listen to the right stuff. Really dive in and study the records with songs that make me, that get that reaction out of me that I was talking about, that stop you dead in your tracks and they really mean something. Finding those records and listening to them over and over again, studying them and figuring out why it is they do that, and how it is they do that. I think that was sort of the first step. And I'd been writing songs for a long time before I ever kept one. There was a lot of crumpled up notes and papers that just ended up in the garbage because I wasn't quite proud enough of what I was doing yet to put it out. And eventually I started writing some of the songs that ended up on my EP that I made about 2 years ago. And those were kind of the first songs that I really felt proud enough to play out to people and put out into the world and get it in people's ears. And I think, I guess I would have been 18, 19 when all that happened, and 21 now, so it's been a few years, and I certainly feel like I've learned a lot more in my songwriting. I'd hope on this new LP is grown a lot. I think certainly from a songwriting standpoint, I think they've grown a lot. I think the songs are a lot more personal and sort of, I guess, autobiographical is the term I've been using. But that's just, it's like anything. You do something for long enough, and eventually you're just bound to get better at it if you're really working hard and if you really care about it.
Like you said, autobiographical is a word you've been using. I've seen you say it in other interviews recently talking about the album, and which that stood out to me in the sense that the album comes out Friday. I haven't heard the whole thing, but is it 4 or 5 songs that have been out and are now on the streaming services I've been listening to over and over the last few days. What hit me about the idea that they'd be autobiographical is they don't seem of a particular time. They may be autobiographical, but they don't. There's nothing in the lyrics that stood out to me as like dating the song. Whether I was kind of wondering, do you purposely avoid references to technology or really anything that would date the song as being of 2016, 2017, because they sound like they could have just as easily been written in, 1977 as much as 2017.
I guess, I appreciate that. I don't think that's ever really a conscious thought that I had, but maybe subconsciously I've been doing that. I think with the exception of 2 or 3 songs on the new record, they're all pretty much true stories about, different events and different things that have happened to me in the past few years. And, I guess I'm not really quite sure. It just the songs seem to just come out the way they do, and they exist on their own, and I, like I said, never really consciously thought of dating a song with certain references like that, but I think if people, some of these songs on this record, if people really dig in and listen to the lyrics and study them, they might be able to pick up some reference of time frame, I guess. But really, it's I guess it's good. I guess I kind of would like to feel like that these stories could be told at any point in time, at any point throughout history, because they're human stories and they're personal stories just that are just about life and struggle and everything that makes us what we are, I guess. I'm sorry if that sounds kind of vague, but it's the only way I know how to put it.
Fair enough. It strikes me, and Sil, our friend from Sony there, had mentioned, he's like, wait till you hear him talk. He talks like he sings. You have that deep, smooth, baritone voice, which is sorry to keep kind of name dropping the old guard, the icons and that kind of thing. But it reminds me of some of those guys. Like, you listen to that first Dylan record, and he was only 20, I believe, when he made it, but he sounded much, much older, and it added a weight to the songs he was singing. You're a young guy. I think 23-ish or somewhere.
21.
21, even younger. And but on record, you would never know that.
Right. I like that. Yeah. I certainly like to keep it that way.
Did you consciously develop your voice, or was that just essentially just the natural way it came out, sort of thing?
Well, it's an interesting thing because I'd been trying to sing. It was sort of like songwriting, like I was talking about before. I'd been trying to sing for a long time as a teenager and hadn't really found anything that worked and that felt comfortable. Yeah. And then one day, probably when I was about 18, I started trying to sing in more of a baritone register and a lower register, and it felt much more natural and just a lot easier. And there was a comfort there that I'd never experienced before trying to sing. So I, from that day on, I thought, okay, this is what I'll try to do. And since then, I've worked on it a lot. And I think, in comparison with the EP that I put out a few years back, I think my voice since then has done a lot of maturing. I never stopped working on singing because I've never thought of myself as a singer. So I always feel like it's something that I could always improve on. So I've been trying to develop it piece by piece and little bit by little bit as we go, and try to get better a little bit every show kind of thing. But yeah, it's just one day sitting around with a guitar and tried to sing a little bit lower than I normally do, that I normally did at the time, and that just sort of stuck. It felt right,
To get into the new record, not to bury the lead here, but to dig deeper into this new record, debut LP, it's coming out Friday. You, just as they start up the jackhammer, but you are working with Dave Cobb. If people aren't familiar with Dave Cobb, he seems to be the go-to producer for guys like Sturgill Simpson, Chris Stapleton, Jason Isbell, closer to home, Core Blund, guys who you kind of identify and who have been credited with kind of trying to bring country back to its singer-songwriter roots and get rid of, that bro country thing, the Florida Georgia line thing that's been going on for too long. Exactly. I couldn't hear that. He's been far too long. And how did you hook up with Dave Cobb? Did he approach you? You approach him? How did that happen?
Well, Dave and I think, obviously I had known of Dave for a while, and I was a fan of his work for a long time before I ever met him. But about a year ago, I played a gig in Nashville at Marathon Music Works. It was a kind of a charity gig. It was called the Nikki Mitchell Foundation. And I met this guy who was in the house band, who was Jamie Johnson's drummer. His name's Chris Powell. And I met him, and he had heard my stuff because I played one or two songs that night, and he had to learn them, and had heard the stuff and liked it. And I think went ahead and sent it to Dave. And after that, a lot of other people that I was starting to meet from around Nashville, I think, had sort of discovered my stuff and tried to get it in Dave's ear. They knew him or they knew somebody that knew him, and so I think he became. I'm not quite entirely sure. I've never asked him about it, but I think Dave became familiar with my stuff through a lot of different sources, just kind of coming in from different angles. And one day, we got a hold of him, and he said, "Let's go have lunch," and we did, and kind of just we never discussed working together really. We kind of just talked about music. We didn't really talk about being in the studio together, but we just talked about records that we loved and kind of just shot the breeze for a while with him, and it worked out pretty well. Because we immediately kind of developed this relationship of just buddies, just somebody that I'd hang out with. And then after that, we kind of, I talked to him on the phone one day, and he said, "All right, let's do this. Let's make a record," But it was a pleasure working with him. He's, like you said, he's developed a name for himself as being the guy in Nashville that you go to see if you wanted to do something. I think, if you want to do your own thing and you're not worried about whether it's going to sell or not, I think he's become the guy that you go see to develop your sound and to tell your own story without anybody else, pulling on your arm and trying to get you to do something that might sell better or something that might be more fitted to radio.
I think my curiosity often with guys like Dave Cobb who become, they develop that reputation, almost an aura of the guy behind these hit albums of a particular sound. What I always wonder is he the guy behind that sound, or is he simply gravitating to artists of that sound? Know what I mean? Or is there a meshing of the two? Like, what was your experience with Dave as far as how much he helped shape the sound of the record and how much he simply tried to make reality what you had in your mind, if you know what I mean?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think he certainly has a few signature tricks, I guess, as a producer that you hear in a lot of different records that Dave does. But at the same time, I feel like he's very much the kind of producer that he doesn't want all his records to sound the same. He certainly wants, at least in my experience working with him, he wanted that record to sound like, I wanted to sound it. Yeah. So I think it's a little bit of both, and I think also it has a lot to do with how great of a musician he is. A lot of people don't know that he's an incredible guitar player. He can play the drums, he can play the bass. And he played a little bit on my record too, which I was really happy to have him. And to have a producer that has all those abilities kind of just in his back pocket is really it's a pleasure to work with somebody like that, and it makes it just that much easier. So yeah, I guess it's a little bit of everything. He has his own sort of signature moves and sounds as a producer and also as a player, but he also cares about individual making sure the record sounds the way that the artist wants it to, and making sure it's an honest representation of whoever he's recording. Yeah.
Before, in the preamble to the question about Dave Cobb, I mentioned guys like Sturgill Simpson, Jason Isbell, Chris Stapleton, again, Elsa Corblund, those guys that, like I said, you fall into who are the antithesis of that, what's kind of become known as bro country, that pop rock country thing that Florida Georgia Line, again, is kind of the face of at the moment. Yeah. You had said it's been going on for far too long. I have to admit I agree with you there. Yeah. But there's almost a debate as to whether these guys are trying to, I don't know, destroy is not the right word, but, whether they're helping Nashville or trying to take down that Nashville Tin Pan Alley bro country sound or whatever you call it. But essentially, I'm just curious to get your thoughts on, is this sound making a comeback and becoming popular, or is it rising up in opposition to what's popular?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think I'd like to think it's making a comeback, and I think music works that way. I think it's sort of like a cycle. People get tired of listening to a certain thing for a while, so the wave of what's popular in the world and in different kinds of music, I think, moves very much in a cycle, and I think the pendulum's kind of starting to swing back the other way, like it did in the 70s when they had that big movement of real singer-songwriters that were writing their own stuff and trying to put out great records. So again, I guess it's probably a little bit of both, because I think one of the big reasons why it's starting to become popular again and people are starting to listen is because I think people are tired of listening, turning on the radio and tuning into a country music station and not hearing country music. I think people are starting to get fed up with the pop and with the pop rock stuff, the bro country, whatever you want to call it. I know I have been for a long time. So I think that they kind of play off of each other. As far as I can't speak for Sturgill or Isabel or any of the guys you mentioned, but as far as I go, I've just always wanted to make the kind of music that I want to make, and it's not so much about sticking it to these guys that are doing the big time commercial radio stuff. It's more about just servicing the fans that want to hear the more genuine, I guess, honest sounding stuff and raw stories. And also myself, I write those songs. A lot of it's self-therapy when I write those songs, but there is a small element of me that is kind of, it's the angry part. And I think a lot of people feel that way. They're mad, and I think that just kind of helps. It's fuel for the fire, that they're sort of just fed up with this BS that's been all over the radio for however many years now. But yeah, I guess they sort of play off each other.
Getting to the end here, but there's one thing I wanted to ask about. I was hesitant to even bring it up because I want your music to stand for itself, but your father's Brad Wall, Premier of Saskatchewan. In the U.S., that probably means nothing. It's not like Americans are covering provincial politics in Canada. Yeah. But, and I'm not sure, maybe it's something you've consciously tried to I'm sure you probably have tried to not draw attention to it, but I ask only in the sense of, as you're entering the industry, and you inevitably know that's going to be mentioned at some point or other, just did you have any thoughts or concerns as to whether that association would color the way that you were perceived and your music was perceived?
Certainly, especially back home in Saskatchewan, because that's where it's the most evident to people, and the most people know about all that most in Saskatchewan and Alberta in the West. So that's always kind of been a concern of mine, and I've always said that look, what I do and what my dad does for a living are entirely separate, and there's no crossover there other than the fact that we have the last name. It's entirely different things, and I'm always quick to point that out, that I'm just trying to do my own job and he's trying to do his. But it's certainly something that I've had to work around, and I'm sure it will be for the rest of my life. It's just kind of an unavoidable truth because he is my dad, and I love him. He's a good dad, and he's been a good father and a good friend to me, and he's always supported me in music. And we don't necessarily agree on everything, but as most fathers and sons don't. But yeah, I'm not. It's not. I would never say I'm ashamed to admit whose son I am, because I do think he is a good man. But it's just it's something that I usually try to avoid talking about, because I don't think there's much relevancy, in that, and with what he does. Like, again, what I said, with what he does and what I do, I'm just about songwriting, man. It's just music, and he does politics, and that's what he's about, But thankfully, it hasn't really been, I think I've more or less, maybe with the exception of a few folks, I've been able to kind of carve out my own path, and people, I think, recognize me as a separate entity, and as long as people are able to do that and separate what I do and what my father does, then I'm happy, because I just want them to listen to the music and make an assessment based on what they think of the music, not what my last name is.
And lastly, here, a record comes out Friday. As is evident throughout the course of this conversation, you've had not just commercial success, but you've had a lot of critical success and accolades and positive words put your way. How much do you keep an eye on the career aspect, as far as, I guess one way of looking at it is, from this album on, what's the blueprint you wish your career to have? How do you want to progress in that sense?
Well, that's a good question, man. I really, for the past 2 or 3 months now, I'm very proud of this record that I put out, but I think it's important to always be looking down the road at the next thing. So I've been thinking about the next record I'm going to make for a long time now, and I just want to make a lot of music and get a chance to record a lot of different stuff, and I have a lot of different ideas, and I write a lot of different songs all the time, and I'm just looking forward to that, and being on the road's great too, and touring and playing for people every day is a blessing and kind of a curse sometimes, but mostly I'm very grateful to be able to do that. But I just want to be able to put out great records and tell good stories that people identify with and that people enjoy,
And, well, man, I'll let you go, but again, Colter Wall, self-titled LP's out this Friday, May 12th, I believe that'll be. Yeah, and it's no. Anyways, all I have to say is all the accolades, all the positive words, all the critical response has been well earned. I love the EP, and I've loved the songs I've heard so far off of the new LP, and I'm pumped to hear the whole thing, and certainly someone to keep an eye on because. Anyways, I think you'll be seeing his name held up there as a premier songwriter, not just out of Canada, but within all around. But anyways, man, this has been a real pleasure.
Good to meet you, man.
Cheers.
Thank you.